that I never knew was that I knew there were some dictators around the world, but did you know that some of the dictators now apparently, allegedly, are drug addicts as well? That might explain a few things. Hugo Chavez now admitting in a speech that went widely undocumented, by the way, that he chews cocoa every morning, and he also eats something called cocoa paste, which, by the way, is addictive. And he gets it from the dictator in Bolivia.
What did you say?
Coca.
It is coca.
Oh, coca.
Cocoa.
Oh, coca would be fine.
Listen.
I don't know my narcotics as well.
See, it's a shame. For a moment, Gretchen, when you just said cocoa, I'd imagine people all across America would just spin up cocoa puffs.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to get a high out of it today.
I'm an Ovaltine guy, but that's for another time. But what you're saying is, I read that too, and then they were people, I guess the reporters went on to define, what is he talking about? He gets his cocoa paste.
Coca.
Coca. I got you going down the
You
coca
take the
path
paste from?
Bolivia dictator. Is he a dictator too?
Millions of people watch these shows consistently, night and day, throughout North America. Do they believe what they see? I hope not. But even the more serious end of the networks and print media in North America and Europe followed the lead of the Bush White House and divided the world into friends. That is, leaders who do what we want them to do, and enemies, leaders who tend to disagree with us.
Raul Castro and Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, a declared enemy of the Bush administration.
I think that we have to view at this point the government of Venezuela as a negative force in the region.
This is the new Venezuela, being built with its own revenue from petroleum. Caracas is one of the showplaces of the Americas today because wise use has been made of the nation's income from oil, approximately half the profits on all petroleum sales. The national policy is to sow the petroleum back into the nation for physical construction, new industry, and public welfare.
After all, we made one recent huge mistake in Iraq, and it seems to me the worse the lie, the more often it gets repeated.
We do have solid evidence of the presence in Iraq of Al-Qaeda members.
With the help of the media's repetition of the Bush administration statements, more than 70% of Americans polled were convinced that Saddam Hussein was involved in the massacres of September 11.
Is there a smoking gun here?
The smoking gun is an interesting phrase.
The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Why are we here? That's the question. Why are we here in this war? Where's the weapons of mass destruction? Why did it take you so long, Wolf, to finally take on Vice President Cheney? It took you to 2007 before you made the man mad.
Those are fair questions. And
I saw Dr. Sanjay Gupta over there embedded with the troops at the beginning of the war. He and the others of you in the mainstream media refuse to ask our leaders the hard questions and demand the honest answers. And that's why we're in this war. We're in the 5th year of this war because you and CNN, Dr. Gupta, you didn't do your jobs back then, and now here we are in this mess.
The same strategy as Iraq was applied to the upheavals in South America. The electoral victory of Hugo Chavez, despite his many critics, was a triumph for Venezuelan democracy. But there is a problem with democracy. As practiced in the South, it can throw up politicians who refuse to accept the dictates of Washington. In the eyes of our leaders, the elected leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, was and is a dictator.
The world's worst dictators, Hugo Chavez.
The Venezuelan president has become more dangerous to the U.S. than Fidel Castro ever was.
ExxonMobil says it's been ripped off by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez.
The Latin American strongman.
There is such a thing as a killer clown, and he may be it in Latin America today.
Hugo Chavez is a dictator.
These rogue dictators like Chavez. If you said, do you hate Hugo Chavez or Fidel Castro, I'd say, I hate those guys.
At the very front of the book, you quote Otto Reich, who is the former ambassador to Venezuela back in the 1980s, is saying that he's more dangerous than bin Laden, and the effects of Chavez's war against America could eclipse those of 9/11.
Chavez is supporting terrorism on a daily basis, is doing nothing about drug interdiction, supports Iranian nuclear ambitions, North Korean nuclear ambitions, works with the Syrians. He's given Al-Qaeda and Hamas an open invitation to come to Caracas.
Who is Hugo Chavez? Where did he come from? The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union was seen by millions as an end to all alternatives to capitalism. Washington seemed gripped by a triumphalist arrogance, as if thinking, now we can do whatever we want.
We're going to take a closer look at a mysterious presence on the international scene tonight. That's how the International Monetary Fund describes itself.
The International Monetary Fund is a powerful financial institution that has 186 countries as members, but is controlled overwhelmingly by the U.S. Treasury Department. Its support for governments in low and middle income countries is often considered crucial to political survival.
The IMF tries to help maintain a stable global economy through the orderly flow of money between countries which have different currencies.
The biggest challenge to Washington's newfound dominance came from South America, a continent the IMF and Treasury Department had often used as a guinea pig in their economic experiments. In 1988, the Venezuelan economy was a mess. Real wages were plummeting and poverty had been rising for years. The Venezuelan government went on its knees before the IMF. The latter obliged, but dictated a structural adjustment program which guaranteed more pay, especially for the poor. When bus fares were raised in February 1989, in accordance with the IMF agreement, Caracas exploded in a fiesta of rioting and looting.
Police in the Venezuelan capital Caracas opened fire again today on demonstrators who were throwing rocks. This is the fourth day of violent protest at the government decision to raise prices on some very basic consumer items.
The government called out the army. Hundreds and perhaps thousands of Venezuelans were shot dead.
They killed my son, cried this woman at a Caracas City morgue today. Anxious relatives checked names on a partial list of more than 200 people reported killed. The morgue is literally overflowing with the bodies of the dead.
That same month, a group of young officers met secretly on the initiative of then Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez and condemned the massacre and pledged that it would never happen again.
Chavez didn't sort of drop from the sky. He was produced from within the army when the army was used to massacre its own people. Chavez and a whole group of junior officers met and said, this is what we were created for. I mean, the military should, its only purpose is to defend the country from outside invasion.
Exactly 3 years later, in February 1992, Chavez launched an unsuccessful rebellion to topple the government. But the general strike that had been promised never happened.
The government of Venezuela dodged a bullet when loyalist troops put down a violent midnight coup attempt. Up to 70 people were killed. Rebel troops failed to topple President Carlos Andrés Pérez.
Y la gran noticia que le traigo a todos los venezolanos es que fueron dominados todos los focos y están detenidos porque se rindieron o porque fueron vencidos.
Chavez was arrested and imprisoned for 2 years. He publicly accepted responsibility.
Compañeros, lamentablemente, por ahora, los objetivos que nos planteamos no fueron logrados en la ciudad capital. Es decir, nosotros acá en Caracas no logramos controlar el poder. Y yo, ante el país y ante ustedes, asumo la responsabilidad de este movimiento militar bolivariano. Muchas gracias.
There is no question the coup was illegal and against the very tenets of democracy that Chavez would later defend in the coup attempt directed at his government. On the other hand, it must not be overlooked that the majority of the population did see Chavez as a hero.
Y puedo decir a plena seguridad de que esta será la última vez que en Venezuela se presenta una situación como esta.
There were celebrations in the capital of Venezuela tonight after the Supreme Court ordered that the president, Carlos Andrés Pérez, must stand trial on charges of embezzlement. He's accused of stealing $17 million in government money.
By 1997, Chavez